In this lecture, we're going to show how to use charts in Excel. We first need to go over some terminology concerning charts. So first of all, what is a chart? It's basically a graphical method for representing data. So think of it as using pictures and different types of diagrams for being able to display the data and show how they relate with other different types of data. Now, a data point would describe a single item in a chart. And a data series is a group of related data points. So we'll have multiple sets of data, and then we can compare them. And then finally, we have a category label, and this is basically the text that describes a data series. We'll now take a look at each chart, and for each one that we're going to describe, I'll provide an example just so you know what it looks like. Here we have what's called a column chart, and this basically displays the data comparisons vertically in columns. Now, this is not the same thing as a bar chart. I will show you a difference of that in just a little bit, but this is a column chart. You might think in grade school that they call this a bar chart, but this is not a bar chart. Now, the category labels are on the X or the horizontal axis. So that would be down here. This is what we would consider the horizontal axis or the X-axis. So these are the category labels. These are the names of the data series that we have in this chart. The numeric values are on the Y or the vertical axis. So that would be this portion right here. So those are the numeric values. And then the plot area would contain the graphical representation of the values. So that would be each of the columns that we have in here. So everything that's inside of this. So the chart area itself would contain the entire chart and all the elements. So in this particular example, we're looking at the revenue that was generated by geographic area. So we're looking at Milwaukee, Buffalo, Harrisburg, and Pittsburgh. And we can see that Milwaukee have just a little bit over $100,000 in revenue. Buffalo has a little under $100,000. Harrisburg has about 215,000, somewhere around there. And then Pittsburgh is probably around 275,000. And just by using the vertical columns, we can clearly see that Pittsburgh makes more revenue than any of the other cities. The next chart we'll take a look at is what's called a clustered column chart. So the idea with this is that we can actually compare multiple sets of data in one chart. So we have this clustered column chart groups, and these are very similar data in the columns. So in this case, we were talking about the revenue by each city in our last example. So now we can actually break it up into different parts. What actual areas were these revenues coming from? So here it was broken up into three parts. We have word processing, which is represented with the blue columns, spreadsheets, which is represented using the red columns, and databases, which is represented using the green columns. So we still have our data points for each city. So this entire column right here would be for Milwaukee, the next one's for Buffalo, the next one's for Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. But now we can see, well, how much of that revenue was in word processing, how much of it was in spreadsheets, how much of it was in databases. So we can actually see some more information with this chart. The next chart we'll take a look at is the stacked column chart. Now, it's similar to the clustered column chart in that we take our data and we break it up into smaller parts so we can see how much is done in certain areas, so we can actually get more information from our chart. The difference here, though, is that the data is actually stacked in a single column instead of just being next to each other as different columns. So here what we would have is that each data series would differ by the color for each category, just like the clustered column chart where each data series had a different color, but now we can see that they're on top of each other. And actually, if you compared this with our normal column chart, you would see that the bars up here at the top, so these bars right here, these would be the exact same values as our column chart, except now we can kind of see more information about it. Maybe like how much of that was with word processing or how much of that was with spreadsheets. Here is our example of the bar chart. This is basically the column chart, except now it's horizontal instead of having a vertical orientation, but everything else here remains the same. We now have our category labels being on the y-axis over here. We have our numeric values on the x-axis, but this is the actual bar chart. In most cases, you're not going to be using this one. The column chart makes a lot more sense here, just because here we're trying to kind of look at it from a different perspective. Maybe there are cases where this is useful, but most of the time a column chart is more effective than a bar chart. The next chart we'll take a look at is called the pie chart. And this basically, it's set up like a pie, like in a circular diagram. And now we can actually see proportional relationships in slices. So this is actually great for showing percentages or market shares. So like in this case, we can not only see how much revenue each of the cities makes, but we can also see the comparisons between like how much of the total area or the total revenue was produced by Pittsburgh, how much of the total area was revenue, I should say, was produced by Buffalo, or how much of the total revenue was produced by Harrisburg, and so forth. The exploded pie chart is just like a normal pie chart. The only difference here is that we would separate one or more of the slices in the chart, and this is used to emphasize the specific data points. So like in this example, we would see that we put an extra emphasis on Buffalo in that it accounts for only 14% of the total revenue. So we separate it from the rest of the chart just so it's a little bit easier to see. And this is just an example of a three-dimensional pie chart. Really, it's just to show that we can take any chart, not just pie charts, and display a three-dimensional representation of our data. So here we can see that we have our 4 cities just shown in a 3D view, but we can do the same thing for column charts, bar charts, and so forth. In fact, you can do all sorts of neat little fancy things to spruce up the appearance of your charts. We just want to show one example of how you can do that. The last chart we'll talk about is the line chart. And this just simply uses a line to connect data points. It can also be used to show trends over time. So here would be an example of revenue increases for, it could be some population, it could be for a city, but we can actually see how it increases and decreases over some time period.